So fast, all tied up like a captive. I'm on to you. Used to pay my life, standing on rainbows, playing it cool. I haven't felt this in ages, and I've no patience. So won't you please stay a bit longer? You're making me stronger, making me stronger.
How's everyone doing today? My name's Croza7, and today we're going to be doing an analysis on the water dog, Suicune. Like in Scizor, his character background is that he's a standard fighter, meaning that most standard fighters are able to be fighting in two methods, up close and personal, or zoners. Meaning they can be able to change basically their way and playstyle on the fly in a way. They're just neutral fighters or standard fighters are more of characters that have easy movements and to be able to help for players that are just studying the game. I've been hearing a lot of people in the Pokken community were talking about that Suicune can be sometimes read most of the time, or be competitive wise, they're like telepathically easy to read most of the time. Mostly here, I'm gonna kind of prove them wrong. Because in rank, I do see a lot of unpredictable Suicunes. And yes, there could be many people that are from the region of the United States or from any other regions. There are a lot of Suicunes out there that can be either very telepathic in their movements or very unpredictable. So with that said, let's get started. For Suicune, there's one little big factor that Suicune has that many people have been OCDing on or trying to have a tech against, is Suicune's counterattack. Out of all counterattacks in the game, Suicune's counterattack has to be the best known counterattack in the entire game. Because of one idea. Suicune has also a follow-up to his counterattack. And not to mention, he can use that follow-up without actually using the startup counterattack. This move is very helpful for any given moment if Suicune is indeed in a pinch, if they want to end up getting themselves out of a wall or trying to catch an opponent in the air that would do like aerial attacks. Because like I said, Suicune can use his aerial follow-up without actually using the main startup counterattack. To be honest, even though this move is very helpful, it does have a very significant defect. I'm gonna have this Suicune start using counterattack on me, and I'll give you the exact reason why. I'm gonna first do is have him unblock so we have reaction on counter. Here's what I mean. That's not what I meant. Like that. If I actually countered him, basically by the end of that, by the end frames his counter, I'm able to catch him off guard for certain situations. This is why most Suicune should not be counter heavy, because of the fact if they read a normal counterattack, they can end up being basically punished for it. Even though Suicune's counterattack has to be the greatest counterattack in the entire game, it's the safest counterattack you would ever find. Because the fact, it's not really risky, but you can punish it for safeness by punishing it entirely by its end frames, since his attack is actually a lunge. See, I can even punish him at the end lag of basically the normal counterattack. So most Suicunes, when they have to use it, or use counterattack, they just use the Y follow-up because of the fact it's much more quicker. Unlike the main counterattack itself, because of the fact that this one has massive amounts of end lag that you can actually exploit, or your opponent can actually exploit the end lag of the said counterattack. Because there's massive amounts of end lag. Alright, that said and done, we're going to be going on to the next thing that actually has Suicune as well in his arsenal, which is the Ice Wall. Everyone likes ice, right? Well, you're going to be starting to hate it once you end up facing a Suicune that knows how to use Ice Wall efficiently. The reason how I knew this technique, or this piece of tech, is that I learned it actually from Alistair after fighting him so many times on... It's either on friendlies, most of the times on rank, but I rarely fight a Suicune on rank, because it's either Mewtwo or Pikachu. So the Ice Wall tech is basically this. I throw an Ice Wall right in front of my opponent, and start attacking in front of him, or analyze his general reactions. So if I throw an Ice Wall right in front of his face, I can get a free counterattack off him if he tries to counter through it. Or say, for example, my opponent would try to attack me out of the blue. If he attacks me out of the blue, I can just go in for the kill. That's one thing that's really useful about the Ice Wall, is that literally all you have to do is analyze what they're going to do in the initial point when that Ice Wall goes up, and how you're going to punish it. It kind of gives you that few second thinking time to know what move you're going to go for next to punish your opponent's movements. However, Ice Wall does have a small problem with it. There's one character I believe that can actually go through Ice Wall unharmed, and I think it is Lucario. I learned this actually so many times on rank, and you could have saw it actually if you watched the original Pokken videos I made on Suicune, is that if I made an Ice Wall on a Lucario, if he uses his back Y, he can able to go through Ice Wall, and it's an immediate critical hit on me if I don't get out of the way. So this tech is very useful, but not that really effective towards a Lucario, because all he has to do is throw one Aura Pulse right in front of your face to actually get rid of him. But it does give you the chance to tech it to see if he is going to use it, so you'll be able to punish him for it. Ice Wall can be very useful, but it can be your downfall. Try to limit the number of times. Like, try to be a little bit... have a variety. Like, another one is very useful in field phase is Suicune's Aerial. Suicune's Aerial JY in field phase had actually got a significant buff for this recent patch in the DX version. As you can see, it's now a 2-hitter, and it can actually be chained. When I mean chained, that means I can use another attack, and it can be initially a combo. In the original Wii U version, it wasn't a second hit. There weren't 2 hits in the air in the water bubble. In the DX, there's 2, and this move is actually chainable, meaning that I can throw a water bubble down and immediately change the phase because it's changeable with another ranged attack. It's linkable, meaning that I can throw a water bubble down and just throw a forward Y in his face while I got hit by the water bubble. It's a very useful movement, because there are some cases that you can't get the Ice Wall up. Using the water bubble can be another good idea too. Many people do get caught off guard because many Suicunes rarely use a water bubble for certain situations. Because most Suicunes that they would see is that they'll see the Ice Wall to the face more oftenly, instead of seeing a water bubble to the face into a linked attack. They rarely see that. So try to adding that in your tech and actually try to catch some opponents off guard. It's not going to catch all of them off guard, it's going to catch off some of them. Next thing we have on Suicune's basically arsenal actually goes back to his dual phase. Because when you heard like with Sceptile having multiple cancels and Pikachu and other characters having series of cancels that are capable of using their arsenal, well, Suicune technically has 2 cancels that can be worked in either field or duel. The first one I'm going to be talking about is Suicune's Icy Wind cancel. Suicune's Icy Wind cancel is that I'm going to throw in an Icy Wind and I hold the R button to basically cancel the attack. This is very efficient for only an Uki setup, not literally if your opponent's already getting up on the ground, not like if they're already standing. Like, it's a good idea, like maybe if your opponent's on the ground, for example. Dang it, I'm trying to do that without causing a phase shift. So simply you can do is go for an Icy Wind cancel into another attack. If they're suspecting, like, you know, a counter attack, and you might go through the frames in certain cases. Like I said, it can only go through in certain cases. There are cases that certain characters can go through your attacks by their counter frames. The other cancel that Suicune actually also rocks is his 5x cancel. Originally, his 5x is known to be as a waterfall. After, like I said, pressing the same button, I'm allowed to use Suicune to cancel that attack. This can be useful if I can end up doing a cancel into another attack or cancel into a grab in certain cases if your opponent gets off from the ground. But more oftenly, everybody would end up using that cancel more oftenly than the Icy Wind cancel because it has a little bit of startup lag. When I mean startup lag, it has a little bit on startup frames that you have to be able to be a little bit cautious on. Because if I go for an Icy Wind cancel and my opponent knows what I was doing, they're going to punish me for it, because it does have a lot of startup lag to actually do the cancel. Because I'm literally going to the Icy Wind animation, but instead, I'm canceling it entirely. So it is kind of vulnerable to that attack. You just have to be very careful when using it. This is relatively safe in certain cases, because all I have to do is use it 5x and press the same button. It doesn't really take that much lag for Suicune to go back in the original position. Not to mention, Suicune can actually use 5x chaining with his aerials, which is something that can be very useful too, because some Suicunes do play rain as zoners. Since in Suicune's arsenal having Hail, Hydro Pump, Aurora Beam, and Mirror Code, it seems Suicune is more used as a fighter that would be more used to keeping people at a distance. But don't get me wrong, there are many Suicunes out there that love to be up close and in your face. But by his general playstyle, most Suicunes like to actually play the guessing game and keeping you at a distance. By either throwing JYs into 6Xs like so, into 5Xs, or throwing a JY into Hail. Because those are some of the good arsenals that Suicune would usually have for keeping people at a distance. Either JY into 5X, or JY into Hail. Because it's very useful to them to keep them at a distance, or have them keep guessing of what attacks they're going to do. But this also can be a problem. That's what the reason that most people think that Suicunes can be easily predicted, because of the fact of how repetitive they can get. But if you can be unpredictable, some of the cases like JY into 2X, there's some cases that Suicune can be playing a little bit unpredictable. Or my personal favorite, the JY into a Poke combo. Because this move is actually linkable to a combo. But the only problem is you have to literally practice the JY when you're landing. Because it's very hard to perform. You have to literally time the JY to the point that you literally can target him before you actually land. And the next thing we're actually going to be talking about that Suicune has a great... This has to be basically some of the things that Suicune can actually have in his arsenal that's very great, into my perspective, is also that he's capable of using Mirror Codes. To be honest, even though Mirror Coat does have a decent amount of startup frames, it's a very good move for opponents that are zoners and can help with Suicune to actually be able to balance the battle into his favor. Like here, for example, even though Mirror Coat does have a little bit of startup frames, it has a little bit of delay in the startup frames, it is very useful for opponents that would try to keep Suicune out or outzone Suicune. Because the fact all he has to do is throw up the barrier and immediately counterattack. It's It's very useful, but like the counter, since the counter, it has a big setback. Because there's certain attacks that you can do that are capable as counter piercers. For example, I would not recommend using Mirror Coat against a Gardevoir, which most commonly will use 2X's against you, and those are by fact counter piercers. So never try to use Mirror Coat unless you feel obligated to. I mean, Mirror Coat's a really good move because the fact you can get some good chip damage off, or a lot of damage off on your opponent if you catch them off guard. But if you try to use it repetitively, you can get Telepath and know when they're going to use Mirror Coat and how can they get punish you for it. And the last thing literally I need to talk about Suicune, but like I said, this is the last thing I think I might be thinking about right now that comes to mind, is that there's one thing I want to talk about is that Suicune's burst is very hard to land. But there's some ways you can be able to land burst safely and successfully in certain cases. But it's always good to land the burst if they're blocking too, even if no, they didn't get hit by it. Because here's the actual initial chip damage you will get if your opponent does actually go for their burst attack. Here's the initial amount of chip damage you're getting. 11 altogether, but that's a decent amount of damage altogether if they're blocking. Sure, it's not a lot, but chip is very useful in the game because if you're trying to win by timeout, it's very useful if they can avoid it or have no choice but to block it. Okay, now it's safely getting the person to fall for your burst attack. That is very hard for you to do. Because there's some cases your opponent, or many people in the Pokken community would say, okay, for Suicune, try to catch them off guard with the burst attack. Even though it's very hard to, because of the fact it's a counter burst. Because as you can see, if I try to use my burst, it has a little bit of startup frames. Meaning if my opponent realizes I'm about to go for my burst, they can literally have at least a decent amount of time to react and jump out of the way. Because my burst attack only covers the ground. Meaning it's not an anti-air as well. It has only ground to ground properties. Meaning that I can actually hit my opponent only on the ground, but I can't hit them if they jump in the air. Like if I had him in mid-jump, he can actually be able to be punished. But if he says, for example, jumps and then tries to increase his airtime with Blizzard, then he would immediately avoid the burst attack altogether. Like I said, it is a problem because his startup frames can leave him very vulnerable either to be grabbed out of it too. But don't be afraid of basically it traumatizing you because of the fact that his burst is slow. You just have to be able to find a way to confirm it easy without getting punished for it. Like some confirms you can actually use head bump in the burst attack, which I think is your 6Y. This actually is a very efficient way to confirm into your burst efficiently and easy, while actually still having the initial burst damage you want. That's an efficient way to actually get your burst safely. Or another way of doing it, even though this is very unsafe to do, is to blizzard in the burst. Because once you're in burst, your blizzard is actually enhanced, meaning it would actually freeze your opponents, giving you just the amount of time you need just to activate your burst. So, overall in the end, Suicune overall is a really good character, a decent character to use. Even though for his minor setbacks of people believing that he's telepathically easy to predict, he can actually be unpredictable sometimes. Out of all things, if I had to guess the difficulty of learning a Suicune and be able to master it, it would have to be like maybe a 5 or a 6 star, because the fact you have to master the amounts of times you have to practice the canceling into methods you'd be able to catch your opponent off guard. Not to mention, if you try to be making yourself predictable, it does make it harder for you to actually learn Suicune if you just play with the same stuff over and over again. Show much more variety into it. When I mean variety, like have more variety on the table, like using different types of moves and techniques that would make your opponent continue to guess what you're gonna do. So with that said and done, that kind of wraps up on basically on his analysis. Even though it's not really covered as much like is in the previous one with Scizor, Suicune just only has a couple of things that actually edge him out as a really good character, even though he has a lot of minor setbacks. However, those minor setbacks, if you end up giving yourself the time and dedication to practice your characters, those minor setbacks will be nothing more than just cheeks in the armor in a way. Nothing really effective whatsoever. So we're going to wrap it here for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed actually this analysis on Suicune. To be honest, I actually enjoyed actually being able to learn Suicune a little bit because, to be honest, in the very beginning, I wanted the main Suicune. Because, to be honest, I actually liked the Water Dog Pokemon. To be honest, ever since I played the game, from the first Red and Blue game I got, I always played with the Water starters. So to be honest, I'm more of a fan of Water types. So, without that said and out of the way, I'm gonna be getting out of here. Because I gotta get ready for another day in the medical world. So, with that said and out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed this and found this educational. And I will catch you guys then. Without that out of the way, take me out. With elegance and grace. Kaboom!